basking that storm. On to other news now. We heard from Kristen Welker at the White House earlier about the president's appointment of an Ebola czar, one person to coordinate federal efforts to confront this crisis. But just 2 days ago, Press Secretary Ernst insisted that was something the administration was not going to do. And the appointment of Ron Klain, Vice President Biden's former chief of staff, is not surprisingly drawing criticism from Republicans who argue his lack of medical experience lessens the credibility of his position. Now, certainly Democrats are not to blame for Ebola in America, but just 17 days out from the midterms, the campaign has become infected with this crisis. Erikka Knuti is a former communications director on the Hill, now with Purple Strategies. And Erikka, I think most of us can agree that this Ebola crisis has been mishandled. Every step of the way, the government has been too slow to act, mistakes have been made, and we're now in a situation that sadly could have been avoided, maybe even a life saved. For the White House, it is all about the government being the answer to our problems. This looks really bad, Erikka, especially just a couple weeks before the midterms.
See, last time I was here, Abby, I promised you guys an October surprise, and here it is. It's Ebola. See? I deliver on my word, right?
Nice job.
I think one of the things is that anytime there's something that doesn't feel like it worked the way it was supposed to, it falls on the administration. That's kind of the thing about being the manager-in-chief, is that you have to take responsibility for any lack of following protocol, any misstep, any mishap. People look to you to be the one that says, I'm responsible. And I think, it's kind of a tough case, right? I mean, one patient that passed away, unfortunately, but far more people die of gun violence. So where do you kind of focus your efforts? And I think the administration was a little slow to act on this, but I think a lot of it is because they're trying to keep perspective on it. One of the things to remember is that a lot of funding for these types of diseases at NIH and CDC have been cut over the years, through sequestration and lots of different kind of ways of trying to trim the fat. And I think we can all agree, NIH and CDC, not fat.
Yeah. Suddenly everyone's rushing to put at least a little bit of that funding back. But Erikka, looking at the midterms, I know two of the states you're focused on in terms of the Senate, Iowa and Colorado. I want to zoom in a bit on Iowa. Joni Ernst is the Republican candidate there. And I've got a theory that it is a bit tougher for Democrats to run against Republican women. Some of the themes that have worked for them across the country are conversations about paycheck fairness, closing the wage gap, Republicans blocking access to birth control, signing on to personhood amendments, things like that. And I think it's a bit tougher for them to make that argument. Even when the woman supports all of those extreme positions, it just doesn't have quite the resonance that it does in some of the other places in the country where they're running against a white man.
That's true. I mean, the contrast in this case is a woman who is not good for women's health issues. So what are you to do? Well, you do the best you can. You talk about things like paycheck fairness, minimum wage, and increasing that. Helping women economically and take control of their health is very important, and Bruce Braley's been doing that in a lot of television ads. I think what you've seen in the last couple of weeks, and when you see that Braley's been kind of catching up lost ground, before he was down behind Ernst pretty, significantly. Now they're statistically tied. I think a lot of it's been women who really maybe wanted to vote for the first woman from Iowa to go to the Senate or to go to Congress at all, but found that she just doesn't hit those notes and just is not great, and they don't feel good about her being in charge of their health. Actually, Bruce Braley has been pulling ahead, and he holds a big advantage with women voters. And I think it just goes to show that lady parts don't just get you lady votes. You kind of really need to actually have the policy.
Well said.
Indeed.
Erikka, the other big midterm news that would have been all over the national news if we weren't covering so many other important stories with Ebola and international news is that you've got several states now that have knocked down these voter ID requirements that have proved so controversial, including just this week Arkansas, which is a fairly conservative state, Texas last week, although that is currently delayed or stayed while an appeals court figures it out. Talk to us about the impact here. There was a new GAO independent government study that said that these voter ID rules can swing turnout by 2 to 3 points, which in certain races might be the margin of victory. What do you think going into the midterms now that we've got a couple cycles here with voter ID being a major issue and being a requirement in about 30 states?
Okay, so I'm really glad you bring this up because voter ID is one of my kind of pet issues. It is one of the stupidest things we have done ever in all of the states. It is really ridiculous. We had a problem that did not exist, and then we tried to solve it. So I'm not really sure why we needed to show IDs, and what we found is that we've actually made it harder for people to vote, and instead of protecting the right to vote through ID, we've actually disenfranchised and actually made the right to vote an even harder thing. I mean, right. I've got my own kind of thing with sometimes in rural areas, people don't even know this, but the DMV isn't always open. In Ashland, Wisconsin, it's open 2 days a week.
And when it is, it's incredibly complicated.
And yeah, it is, and it's hard to get there. My mother works in the polls in Madison, Wisconsin, another state where they had their voter ID law just struck down, thank God. And there was a woman, she had to turn away because she didn't have an ID, a state ID. The DMV doesn't give IDs to people living in hotels. So she was a registered voter. She absolutely eligible to vote, but because she was living out of a hotel, she couldn't get a driver's license. And that kind of a story, it's all over the country, and I'm so glad that judges are starting to make moves on this and to strike these laws down.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Fully agree with you.
No, we should encourage people. More people should vote. We want more people to vote. Make it easier.
Erikka, can we talk about the Florida gubernatorial debate madness?
What happened?
To what do you refer?
Fangate, I'm referring to, Crystal. It was brilliantly sliced up by the young Jon Stewart last night. Let's look at that.
Is there anything wrong with being comfortable?
Now that is how you win votes in Florida. Right now, 1 million Altacockers in Florida are turning to their friends going, I mean, he's got a point. You should be, you should stand all night in the lights. I mean, he should be comfortable.
Erikka, what do you think about that notion of, well, maybe he's got a point. Maybe that is a way that when you make that argument that a way to win some votes, does silliness like that ever have an impact?
Okay, well, first of all, from kind of the campaign operative perspective, I completely understand what happened. The negotiations over debates are very intense. They are very deliberate. Whether or not we have podiums, are you allowed pen and paper, how many cameras, how many questions, it is all negotiated beforehand. And so when one candidate feels like the other candidate is violating the rules, there's an understandable amount of kind of frustration. I don't know that it means that a fan is an electronic device that shouldn't be allowed on stage. But if you think back to the Mitt Romney debates with President Obama, and you saw the close-ups, there's kind of a little bit of sweat on his face, maybe the fan, would have been a good thing for him, because a lot of people felt like he looked nervous.
But whatever you negotiate, don't go out at the beginning of the debate. That makes it all the worse than it would be.
It's ridiculous.
Well, right, because that's something that operatives think, right? That's like what people who do this for a living. But the average person is like, it's a fan, guys. Yeah. Like, come on. And if you're the governor, you have to look like you can roll with the punches a little more than a fan.
Right. I think they both look pretty terrible, guys. Let's just act like men and have an actual debate. Erikka Knuti, thank you as always for joining us. And up next, what an internal memo is revealing about the UN response to the Ebola crisis, and still ahead, my thoughts on the U.S. response and the person who showed up in the White House last night that actually calmed my fears.